Welcome to the Marquette, Kansas celebrating 150 years video. This video is broken down into three parts with an intro and outro slideshows without audio. If you would like to skip ahead to the presentation by Alan Lindfors, you may skip to the 18-minute mark. There are more pictures available that were not shown, so if you would like to view them along with what was shown, there will be a link in the description below the video. Enjoy.
everything's going to go smooth. I'm going to turn it over to our history man now, Lindfors.
You know, Janice, so we're talking about this is the beginning of the 150th celebration. And of everybody, Janice, you were what, 3? When you
Behavior, I won't run this thing for you.
Years ago, I had to work with Janice and out at the lake. And
Now that was vice versa. I had to work with
twice a
him.
week, she would walk us out of the concession stand. So if she's going to run it like that, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I want to give you some information about Marquette, and then we have a slideshow and show some pictures. But there's a lot of, Marquette is unique in many different ways. You know, some towns were founded because of the railroad, some were from migration. In Marquette's situation, it was a unique combination of Americans or Civil War veterans and then the Swedish immigrants here. A lot of the odd numbered sections were bought by the Galesburg Land Company for the Swedes, and a lot of the Swedish people came here. But there was also a real influx from Pennsylvania and different places back east of Civil War veterans. And so it was a unique situation where the non-Swedes and the Swedes had to get along with each other. They had to understand each other's languages. They had to work together. It really was a unique situation. And I think this, I was going to say it to the last, but I think it works good at the beginning. John Hedberg, Jackie, your grandfather, wrote this when he kept all kinds of minutes. He wrote this about what a town is like. And he said, small towns die because people expect them to die. Too much negative thinking. Think positive and you will find faith which will build any town. There is a future for Marquette if only its people will think so. And I truly believe that. We've been here over 150 years. Marquette was founded February 9, 1874. But before they founded the town, I want to tell you a little bit about the first people that came were ones like James. And some of these names you will remember, and you've heard them all through your life. Claypools, the Hugheses, and the Wayburn brothers came in 1867. The very first part of the county was formed south of Marquette called South Sharps Creek. And that was Isaac Sharp back in 1859. So it was even before the Civil War. But Marquette really started getting settled about 1867. The Claypools and the Hugheses farmed northwest of Marquette. And that's where they settled. The first person to reside in what is now Marquette was a Swede. That was Andrew Anders Eriksson. And he had a dugout. He came in December of 1868 with J.P. Stromquist, who helped found Fremont. And he came in 1868 and he had a dugout. The location of the dugout is behind Riverview Villas, down where the Dry Creek pours into the Smoky Hill. It was right there. There's a plaque that gives you a notification. There were other Swedes that came in '69, like the Hedbergs, the Hansons, the Eriksons, the Schugrens. There were a lot of the Swedes. The Ingdals came in 1870. There were the P.F. Linds came in 1869. The Bromans came in 1869 and settled just on the southeast corner of Marquette. So we had a lot of people that were settling right around here. And the town started to grow from that. But it was because of 5 men that really Marquette became to be. It was at D.N. Myers, and you've heard the Myers family. D.N. Myers owned 80 acres right south of Marquette, and he had a dugout and a log cabin right on the south edge of the Smoky Hill, right before the curve goes around going west. And that's where his dugout was. And that was in 1872. In 1873, a man by the name of H.S. Harrison S. Bacon came from Marquette, Michigan, and he came down. His family had settled down by Lyons, Kansas, and he had heard from the old timers that it was a place that had a good foundation that they could build a mill. And he was a miller up in Marquette, Michigan. So he came and found where would be a good location for the mill, and went and talked to D.N. Myers, bought his land for $1,200, 160 acres for 1,200 acres. Can you imagine that? But anyway, he did at that time and brought his family in, and they settled into that dugout. D.N. Myers then moved on south and homesteaded down farther south. But then his son-in-law, J.A. Foster, came from Illinois, and he was a druggist. And so he built a store, and I probably, hopefully don't confuse you, but if you know, sometimes I'll refer to where somebody lived before, and I know Joanne, you'll just have to bear with me. But anyway, where Chris Allstat lives, right south on the corner of Riverview Estates, right there, that is where the first store was. J.A. Foster built a general store, and he had a house up above. He lived up above. So that was the first building in town. Okay, then in 1874, J.A. Foster built a house, and it is the house where Dory Weber lives now. And if you don't know, ask somebody. But anyway, it's where she lives. And it was built from the cottonwood lumber that was made from the old sawmill that was down by the river. H.S. Bacon built the dam, and he used some of the early settlers like the Shugrens and the Hedbergs and the Hansons helped build that dam in the spring of 1873 across the river, kind of where the rocks are now. That's kind of where it was. The actual mill, when they built the sawmill first in 1873. In 1874, when they built the mill, it sat basically where the bridge crosses the Smoky Hill. Right on this side, that is where the mill sat. And if you go down and look, you'll still see part of the foundation. It's a sandstone foundation down there. So it's still, remnants of the place is still down there. Okay, Anders Ericsson built a log cabin. His house was not in the town yet because he sold 10 acres to H.S. Bacon, and then they gave, and then Anders Ericsson sold the other 70 acres to the town company. So that gave us the 80 acres for the town to start. But Anders Ericsson built a log cabin down by where the dry creek goes in, not too far from his dugout. Then in 1874, he built a stone house, and that stone house is still standing. It was the old Art McCormick house, and right now it's pretty close to where Jay Baker lives. It's a stone house. It's been stuccoed over. It's right behind Marcine. It's right close to your place. So if people want a tour, you can bring their tour, okay? Okay. Anyway, we've covered basically the settling. And they had the store, they had the mill. In 1871, December 1st, 1871, P.F. Lynn, which I see descendants out here, I see them, started a post office out at his farm, and he called it Kalmar after Kalmar, Sweden. And that was where the post office was. Had we not had the mill and not had the store, more than likely Marquette would be called Calmer, Kansas to this day. And we'd be out north, carrying would be all around your house. Anyway, but in 1873, they moved the post office into Marquette, and they wanted to name it Marquette after Marquette, Michigan, where H.S. Bacon had come from. So that's where the Marquette, even though there's a lot of Swedes here, we have a French name. So it's very unique. We have Americans, we have Swedes, we have a French name. So we're very international here in Marquette. The town in 1874, they had been having some discussions about starting an actual town right north of the mill. They didn't want to do it south of the mill because of the flooding. In 1867, there was a flood that the old-timers and the Indians remembered that came up to this corner. It came all the way up to Main Street, to this corner, and that's how much it flooded. So when they built the town, they wanted to make sure we stayed north of the river. On February 9th, there were 15 men that met in the one-room cabin. The one-room cabin was attached to the Hanson's log cabin. This one-room cabin is in our backyard, and it's still there. The log cabin was used in 1870 for the very first elections when they had the elections to start McPherson County. They did it in the log cabin. 1871, they added the wood frame cabin. In 1874, that is where Marquette started. There were 15 men that met and signed the town charter. And I can read you some of their names. I just think you need to know the names that were involved. It was H.S. Bacon, John F. Maxwell, J.P. Stromquist, Charles F. Stromquist, those are from Sharps Creek, S.D. Wynn, he's the one that built where the library is now. He built that building. August Broman, and he had the brick plant here in Marquette. J.A. Foster, who was the first postmaster. S.J. Dara, and Nancy, you guys know the Dara's family. And so we have that. William Simmons, Andrew Erickson, Hans Hansen, J.M. Foltz, and J.M. Anderson. These were the ones that met that night in February 9th, 1874, signed the town charter. They had it signed before J.M. Underwood, and he was the probate judge at the time, and they took it over to McPherson County and registered. So Marquette is now 150 years old. Janice was in the background at the time. She was just little, so it wasn't, babbling in the background. Anyway, the town grew from that point and started to build different things, but they built between here and the river. That's where the first buildings were done. And so we had some of the buildings here, but in 1886, the sixth store across the street, which they called the Opera House Block, was built at a cost of $50,000, which in those days was a huge amount of money. But they built that for the stores, and that was the start. That was built out of the Marquette brick, brick plant just east of town. In 1887, they built the bank building, which the library is in now, but the two stores down. And then in 1888, a man named W.H. Brooks, which would be Craig Larson's grandfather or great-grandfather. Great-grandfather. It was a general merchandise store, and that's where the art space was. And that's where they had a store there. In 1888, this building, this south half, was built for the Smoky Valley Bank. The first bank was started in 1886 in the little building right south of the EMT building, where the ambulance building is. The little building there, that's where the bank started. And then in 1888, the Elvin brothers built this, and this was the bank building, Smoky Valley Bank building. Then in 1901, they added the second half on and added the iron front work, the ornate front work, and made this huge store. And that's where it became the Petersons, had their homework store, they had the dry goods, and the grocery store. And we can tell you little interesting facts. Marquette's always had characters, and we're hoping to do a book for the celebration of the interesting characters and interesting names, nicknames that people had, and a little bit of history. But Cecil Peterson was one of the three brothers, and when they cleaned out the store, they found about 6 areas where fires had started, because he always smoked, and the ashes would drop, and it would start a little fire, and they just stomped and put it out. So it's a wonder this place didn't burn down. But anyway, he was one of the characters. He and his brother Howard, and then Kermit, which they called Dopey, and I don't know why. So anyway, different names. Anyway, there are many characters. I got off track. Okay. In 1886 and 1887, the railroad came through, and that's really what instigated the building that was happening. I don't know if Dixon is here tonight or not, but anyway, your house was originally going to be a hotel, because the railroad was going to come right where the city park was, and so they built that as a hotel. And when they luckily kept it right at the edge of town, and then that became family and everything else. But it was that was made out of brick also. So it was the first house built in Marquette out of brick. So kind of an interesting fact. But anyway, after the railroad came through, the lots went and they built on, they added different stores. For example, where the distillery is one of the latecomers. That was built in 1920 for the Farmers Union Co-op. It was part hardware store, part grocery store. Where the motorcycle museum was the Ross Brothers hardware store. That was built in 1910. And then in 1912, they built the corner building, and that was built for Piper's had a meat market, and Bernisson's had a meat market there too. So different buildings, and we've had different buildings that have constructed all the way through the town. And many houses were built. The Methodist Church, they had an organization as early as 1874. They met in the schoolhouse, and then in 1880 they signed their charter and built how many remember where the old Methodist Church was? Some of them do, okay. So you know what I'm talking about. The old Methodist Church sat there, and it was destroyed in the tornado of 1905, and then they rebuilt it again in 1906. They lost the steeple in the tornado of 1951, which Janice, were you retired by then?
I was holding on to it, yeah.
Okay, anyway, okay. Sorry. Okay, the Covenant Church is now the Valley Community Church. The Valley was set where Paul Magnuson's house sits now. It was founded in 1904, and then they remodeled it in 1923, and then in 1958, they built the one that's on Main Street. So that's kind of the quick history. And then the Lutheran Church was the first church building built in town. It was built in 1879, and it's built where the other one sits right now, destroyed in the tornado of 1905, and then rebuilt in 1906 to the brick. They didn't want to go with the wooden one, I guess, and so that's where it is now. So that gives you kind of a history of the buildings and some of the historic places here in town. Any questions? Anybody have any questions? I want to talk, since we're just almost 119 years, almost to the day from when we had the tornado. And it's cloudy outside, so you never know. No questions. Okay, I'll just keep them down. Okay, I have a question way in the back. Can't hear you.
Why do you think there were so many banks built very early?
Well, the Smoky Valley Bank was, I think, more of a private bank, and it was the Nels Elvine. They had the drugstore, the early days of drugstore, and more of a private one. In 1892, they built where is the Marquette State Bank, and that was built as the Marquette State Bank, and a group of men went together. After the tornado, they decided they needed another bank for competition, and so they built the Farmers State Bank and across the street, and so they had the two banks, the most we ever had at one time. The Smoky Valley Bank died in the 1890s after the Marquette State started. And then the two banks merged in 1967, and so we just have the one bank now. So it was kind of a competition. And at one time we had 5 grocery stores. Yes, there were 5 grocery stores.
Where were they?
Well, one was here, one was across the street where the senior citizens is. Okay, then the meat market was also sold groceries, where Brooks had the general merchandise store, also sold groceries, and then behind the Marquette Library was the Thompson store, and that was a grocery store also. Is that fine?
Yeah, I have a picture.
Okay, good.
1989.
Okay, Karen.
The library building was Marquette Bank in 87 first.
Right.
And then in 92 it became the state bank.
Exactly. Yeah, it kind of, the same guys that were involved in the 1887 kind of went back and forth, but they kind of formed the state. I think the early one maybe was not state rendered. So, but it says Marquette Bank above there. So, and P.F. Lynn was president for
He was
50
the first
years.
president of the state bank.
State Bank,
He was a
right.
board member of the Marquette.
Yes. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I want to talk about, oh, I see one way in the back.
I remember 3 of the grocery stores with the Where was the other 2 located?
Okay, which one's he saying? Okay, Homework was here, the old IGA, Kivett's on the corner. Right. Okay, at one time, there was where the senior citizen center is. They had a grocery store, and then behind the library, behind the old bank building, was the Thompson grocery store. Ida Sharkey had a ceramic shop. Okay? Now, I can't go way back. Only Janice will remember that.
I was quite down.
Okay, Jerry?
Just how old is
Janice?
Too old.
Well, she helped move the logs off the street in 1867.
Did she do that creek stuff?
Yeah, she blocked it. Oh, yeah.
About the brick place.
Okay.
And then how that they built the brick.
Yeah, Jenny said, the brick, when I talk about the Marquette Brick Company, it was a half a mile east of Marquette, and it was August Broman that had the Broman family, you know that, yes. And so the Broman family had different stores in town. They had John F. Broman, different Bromans had different things, and they were all in that. But August Broman had the brick plant, and if you go out just on the southeast edge of Marquette, you'll see the brick house where the Elwoods lived. That was built with using the Marquette brick, and that's where August Broman lived. And she then married a wire miller, and then she married an Elwood. So that's the progression. But that's where the bricks came from. So, okay. What?
What do you know about the bank robbery?
The bank robbery, let's see. Janice?
I was one of the robbers.
Yeah, they never did find all of them. I think Janice was helping us a little bit.
Her aunt was watching her say.
Yes, across the street at the former state bank, I believe 1932, but I'm not for sure. But they had a bank robbery, and they think it was Pretty Boy Floyd is the one they think robbed the bank, and he had been watching the town, and Ernest always went home every day for lunch, and as soon as he went home, he locked Effie Peterson, and he locked Oni, Leona Carlson in the vault. They took the money and left town. So we had a real live bank robbery here in Marquette. And they never did catch him, but if I remember right, in later years, he confessed, and one of the places he said he robbed was the Marquette Bank, and it was the Pretty Boy Floyd. So, Pretty Boy Floyd. Okay, I want to talk to you about the tornado. That's probably our most infamous thing that happened in Marquette. On May the 8th, 1905, before I tell you anything, in 2005, we had the 100th remembrance of the tornado. We had the last survivor of that tornado. Fred Peterson's mother, Geneva Peterson, was 7 months old when the tornado hit. She was at the celebration in the park in 2005. So it's kind of, Fred, where are you at? Okay. So anyway, in 1905, it had been raining all around Marquette, which unfortunately that's the way it seems like it's doing now. And that night, about 11 o'clock, the tornado started about 10 miles south of Marquette and pretty much followed the section line until it got to the river, and then it veered off just a little bit, and then went down basically Jackson Street in Marquette, which, after that they called it Cyclone Street. But it took many farmhouses, did tremendous damage. But when it went down on Jackson Street, it pretty much took everything west of Main Street, except Dana Olson's house, which was R.A. Thompson's house, and the Peterson house across the street, which is now called the Preston House. But those two houses were left standing. And then on North Lincoln, where Holcomb lives now, Diane and Brad Service live there, catty corner south from the park. If you know what I'm talking about, that house is left standing. But basically, everything else was wiped out. They say now that it was F5 tornado. An F5 tornado. It was the worst tornado in Kansas until the 1950s when Udall was hit. And it was just devastating. It was. Hit at 11:03 at night or 11:05. They had different stopwatches they found. But they had no warning. And it sounded like a railroad train coming through. And it hit, and it hit people, and many people on the east side of town didn't even know. Whoa! I just thought that was amazing. Okay, was that my hint to be done? Anyway, just starting, yeah. Many people on the north side of town didn't even know until they got up that morning that it hit. Yeah, it just went so fast. And it went down, all the way down, basically down Jackson Street, but also took many houses on Lincoln Street. It took, of course, the Methodist Church and the Methodist parsonage were just leveled. I know John Carlson's house was leveled. Many of the houses along there were leveled. It also leveled the Lutheran church. The parsonage, although damaged, was still left standing, and that is the house where it is now located right north of the Lutheran parsonage, where Hernandez lives now. He used to sit where the parsonage sits, and they moved it in 1914. But they used that as a mortuary, and they used the Holcomb house, which at that time, Eula Buchanan, that's where the Brooks family lived. Eula Buchanan was a little girl at that time, and that's where they lived, and that's where they did many hospital operations. They called in doctors from the railroad. They were able to get through and get some doctors from Salina and Lindsfors come in here, but they had no anesthesia. Scott Johnson's great-grandmother, Mrs. Charlie Celine, their house was totally destroyed. It said where Pam and Danny Morrell live now. And that house was totally wiped out. The Celine family, Ione was 7 years old when it hit. She and her sister, Viola, were carried on the mattress about 500 feet in the air and dropped about 2 blocks away. But they survived. I mean, they were, pretty bruised and everything, but they survived. Mrs. Celine was damaged, and sorry for the graphic, but her intestines were literally hanging out. They took her into the house and did surgery to get her insides back in, and they did that without any anesthesia. So you can imagine what many people went through. There was Janice. Janice was not home at the time.
I had 5 ancestors.
Yes, Janice's great-grandparents, and I'm just serious on this, her grandparents and those great-grandparents, her 2 great-grandparents and the 3 family members were all killed. They lived on the south of Jackson Street, and they were
2 of them
killed.
were old enough they were out working.
Yeah, your grandmother and your great uncle were gone. Yalmer were gone, otherwise they had been killed too. There was also at the north end a man named Switzer that lived, and his family is buried out at the Marquette Cemetery. He was a widower, and he had 3 girls, and they were all home at the time. They were all 3 killed. So it was very tragic. Also, there was a lady by the name of Beata Swanson. And a few years ago, when I still worked at the bank, she came, family members came from Sweden, and they wanted to find out what happened. They had corresponded with her until 1905 and lost correspondence. So we went up to the church, and of course it's all in Swedish, and we found, and what had happened, she was carried by the tornado out by the Lutheran cemetery and buried up to her waist and broke multiple bones. She lived until the July of 1905 and then died. And so they were glad to know that it happened, why they lost contact with her. But there were a lot of tragedies. There were some beautiful Victorian homes on Jackson Street that were just wiped out, just wiped out. And yet, on the east side of town, hardly anything happened. Our house, unfortunately, was not damaged into one of the red stained glass windows out, and that's why they made it into a door. But that was the only damage they had happened. But the Opera House, which, if you guys go over right across the street on the south side of the building and look up, you'll see that the second story of the Opera House was ripped out.
We have a picture of that.
Janice, we have a picture coming up. So there was damage here, but we were fortunate that it didn't go down Main Street. Otherwise, it would have been a terrible, terrible disaster. 28 people were killed that night. 28 people in the town of 600. That is like the equivalent of, percentage-wise, we figured out, that would be like about 950 people being killed in McPherson, or more like 3,000 people being killed in Salina. So you can imagine, you know, the amount of loss. Everybody had somebody who was killed or injured. They had more people that died, so the final count was 33 people. 33 people in a town of 600. So they had many, many funerals going on. They held them in the city park, and they also held them at the Covenant Church and in the schoolhouse. One story, which is nice, and it's not nice, but it kind of helped to ease the tension. At the old Lutheran parsonage, they lined the bodies up. They were using it as a word. And Dr. Baird was going, trying to identify all the bodies. And he came to this one body, and the old guy sat up. He said, "I hit the bix." Means I didn't have any pants. So he was hiding there with all the dead bodies because he didn't have any clothes. I hit the mix. So anyway, that was kind of that. But anyway, so the tornado really, really hurt Marquette. I mean, it was growing, and we had a building boom right after that, and very positive. They kept going. That's what John Hedberg wrote. They didn't use negative thinking. We're going to keep going, no matter what happens. We're going to make sure Marquette stays and keeps going. And that's what we're here today. We're here because of our ancestors and because the people had positive thinking and wanted to keep this town going. And Janice will probably be here when our grandkids are. Okay, we're going to show you some pictures. And show you some pictures. Get refreshments because I'm not getting to use mine, so I guess you guys can join me.
Take a couple minute break and let them get
Yeah, go get some refreshments. Yeah, go get some refreshments, and then we'll start the slideshow.
you might add Alan. Hey, Alan. Tell them that all these pictures are on sale today.
What is it? Can you tell it goes to the celebration?
I had no idea where that.
Get out here. You were right there with me, Carrie.
all these pictures on this disc, years ago when I actually had time to do something, I put them on a CD. The CD is at the bank and for sale, so if you want a copy of all these pictures, you can go in the bank and buy it. This also is a presentation from the Recreation Board of Marquette, Kansas, which we voted a 1 mil levy for about several years ago. And the people on the Recreation Board are Ronnie Larson, Scott Johnson, Brandon Hulse, Kelly Lindfors, Doreen Cunningham. Who else, Ronnie? There's 6 of them. I forgot somebody. I'm sorry. But I'm in charge of the adult, what's that? Josh Nelson. Okay, thank you. That's all 6 of them. They're responsible for all the recreation that goes on in town here. You have Abby Hudson that's in charge of the younger people, all ball planes and everything. And then I try to handle some money for the seniors. We have some bus trips, and then I try to put on some programs and different things like this. So you need to thank the Recreation Board for getting us all started on this. I appreciate it. And then we're going to see pictures.
While Janice is getting ready,
I'm
I
ready.
can tell you a story about Janice.
What's that?
If she gives you any trouble, or she's talking too much and you just want her to be quiet, just start humming Amazing Grace.
Okay, there you go, Alan. Get up there and booth pictures.
Okay, and Fred reminded me, one thing that was a good development was the Canopolis Lake. The Canopolis Lake, when they built that is the oldest man-made lake in Kansas. And it was for flood control. And they had to stop it during World War II, but it was completed around 1950. Fred, are you verifying that? 48. See, I knew you'd come up with something. But anyway, that has been a big boom. We were the closest town to Canopolis. Should have been called Marquette Lake, is what it should have been. Yeah.
One other thing too, I have a CD that my brother Ronnie got up in Ellsworth. It's about the Sherman Lake. It's got all the pictures on it. Sherman Ranch, sorry. And it was up. It was up there where the lake's at. I don't know how many acres, but there was a whole lot of history of that too. Dr. Hodges gave us, Lou Hodges gave us a history report on Sherman Lake and Ronnie Ranch. Okay. So, I'll put it back to somebody.
Okay. This is a picture of Marquette from an aerial view. Ta-da. Go ahead.
Well, I hope it works like he said it was going to.
About in the 1950s, you can see the elevator was just built and the old elevator is still there. So this is probably middle 50s. The bridge was put in, so it'd be 56. This is a picture from the top of the Ferris wheel where Riverview Estates sits now in the 1949 75th anniversary celebration. And that was taken from the top, looking north on Main Street. You can see Chris Alsted's house in the foreground, and you can see the Main Street area there. So,
You need to come over here where you can
I
point.
got a question.
okay?
Who lives in that house, like, south of us? On the corner, from White Riverview? Who lived there originally?
I can't tell you. I did research. Yeah, I don't know. So,
Brooks. It was the Brooks family.
the Brooks, yes. Julie Brooks, yes. Okay. As soon as we get it enlarged, a little more, that way.
I'm trying. He put a new Uh-oh. That's as big as you're going to get it
No,
right
that's,
now.
you gotta go back. That's the,
Back?
yes.
That's the same picture.
I gotta get it big. No, it's not. There.
That one's the one you want?
I want that. Now go, the next one.
He told me if I double clicked on it, it would get bigger. There it goes.
Double click again.
I did. If I double click again, it goes smaller.
Okay. This is the picture of Marquette in 1884. It's the earliest known picture of Marquette. And you can see that building right there. That is the old Foster General Store. That was the first building built in town. And it's set right on the corner of where Riverview Estates is now. So that was the first building there. You can see, okay, and this is also, no, that isn't, okay, keep going, keep going.
I'm trying. That's the same picture, isn't it?
Yep. Okay, that's called a map of the city of Marquette.
It's the same picture still?
I know. I'm going to start singing again, Janice.
I might just get up and leave you.
Okay, this is a picture in 1887. You can see in the previous picture, you can also, if you can barely see up at the top, center is the Swedish Lutheran Church. There is the Foster House. There was another store beside them. On this side, the Darris had a hardware store, one of the first hardware stores, and about halfway through, you can see a block there, and that they're building the Opera House block. You know, it shows most of the buildings up until they built that were in this south block. So that's why you see such a good, and this picture is taken from the top of the mill. And you'll eventually see a picture of the mill. This picture in 1887 again.
Is it the same picture?
Yes. Same one again. Okay, this is a picture of the north end of Main Street looking south. This is where Chris and Sarah Jane Smith lived. That was built by A.P. Renius. He had a lumber yard across the street where the gas station is now. He had a gas station. And the next one is where Max Houck lives. And the big building there is the Cottage Hotel. It's set on the corner of, well, that'd be 6th and Main Street. And the Cottage Hotel was built about 1895, and it was a very hotel up until I was, you know, a little tiny kid. And the Peterson family were the last family to live in it, but it was torn down. So you can see Main Streets before we just had mud.
I'm having a terrible time with this. Do it. Try that. There's a better picture.
Same picture.
I know, but it's a better picture.
It's a better picture, okay. Okay, this is Marquette Main Street, a block north from here, looking south. This is in the 1920s. I don't know how in those days, everybody's car looked exactly the same. It did. All Model Ts or Model As. And if you can look real closely over here, they have the old water fountains that we were able to restore. Put back, they had one on the north end of Main Street and the south end of Main Street on that block. So that is a picture in the 1920s.
Hey, Alan, Stan Alstead told me that, now it was later, because they weren't Model A's, but it was a long time, the cars looked exactly the same. When Stan was little, he could tell every car by the license plate and who owned it, and people, like on Saturday nights, would pay him a nickel to identify whose car it was by who
That was good. Okay, here is looking on Main Street, looking south. Here is the building, right here is the building you're in now. I mean, looking north, I'm sorry, looking north. Here is the Opera House block. This was done, there's the bank building, it'd be the senior center now, the drugstore. And Yuarda told me a story that she and I own used to, on Saturday nights, in front of each of the stores, the building, especially across the street, had stores underneath. And so they would use those stores where they had grates, and there were windows down to see. But Yuarda and Ione would crawl down there and get nickels and dimes, whatever, and do that. So, I mean, interesting story, but they used to do that in front of the stores. Okay, this would be in probably the 1940s. You can see there is the Fine Arts Center, used to be the old Strand Theater. The drugstore would be right there. So you can see, and you can see the old-fashioned street lights we used to have. So, and then of course these two buildings are gone now. That's where there'd be the restaurant, and those two buildings would be where the parking lot is. Okay, this would be looking south from about a block north of here. And you can see it was real close to the Carlson blacksmith shop. They've got some buggies over here. And if you notice the top of the library, it had a tower on it. So you can see the tower. We have a better view of that in a little bit. Okay, this is a picture of Main Street, across the street looking towards this building that we're in, and there's the distillery. This was during 1924 in the 50th celebration. This was the 50th celebration. Another picture of Main Street showing a little bit. This was probably before 1910 because these, where the motorcycle museum is, those buildings are gone now. Okay, this is on the side of this building. There used to be a stairway that went up to the top. At one time, it was called the European Hotel up above here. And they used to have apartments and give piano lessons and everything. And then across the street south was the Celine livery stable. So.
Ready?
Yep. Okay, this is on South Lincoln Street. This is where the mayor lives now, where Andy Williams lives. That was built after the tornado. The first house was wiped out. Hulda Elvine lived there, and then she rebuilt that house into that. So it's just a view of Marquette. Okay, this is across the street. If you were standing across the street on the corner looking north, this is about 1908, a storm, snowstorm. You can see wouldn't we like to have that moisture now? Yeah, really. You can see some of the grates. They went out into the sidewalk like that. Okay, Janice. Okay, and here's the building you're at now. Like I said, the first half was built in 1888. The second half was built in 1901, and then they added this ornate storefront, which is very unique in America. Not many stores have that. So it's a very well-preserved building, and Stan and Michelle have done a wonderful job restoring it back. Go back. Can you go back one? That's Janice on the stairway.
Now look, you lost mine. I'm gonna get you back for this, you know that.
Okay, next.
Go. You might add, you might tell them that you painted all that. Tell them that you painted all that up there.
No,
Yes.
that's okay.
Tell them.
No, no, no.
Back in Alan's younger days, he painted all the front of that
I really did.
He really did.
building. Yeah.
Okay, enlarge it. Okay, this is across the street. This is what was called the Opera House block. It was 6 stores, and that's what cost $50,000. Olaf Olson, remember the Olson's Furniture Store? He was one of the Opera House blocks. Also, a man named Eric Lexel, who was the father-in-law to Berger Sanzani, was also involved in building that. And it cost $50,000, and the rock, the foundation is the rock that came from the natural crown. And I just need to mention about the natural crown. It was south of Marquette about a mile, and then about a half a mile west and back in the pasture. It was so well hidden that truly the Indians that were around here kept a small herd of buffalo. It was the last wild herd of buffalo that was in Kansas. And they kept them hidden because it was hardly an entrance, and they could once in a while get a buffalo out, and then eventually the settlers found it and found the buffalo. But that's where they hid the buffalo, in the place called the Natural Corral. It's now enlarged because a lot of the rock foundations, that's where the rock came from.
Hey, Alan,
Yeah,
why is it called the Opera House? I've always wondered that.
because the top half, this top floor, the top floor and the back went all the way for 3 stores. And it went there, and that's where they had the Opera House. And the Opera House had different visitors here. They did operettas. They even played basketball one time. William Jennings Bryant, back in the 1880s, was here. And so we had some visitors.
There really was opera type stuff.
They did operettas. They performed. They didn't bring in Kansas City Opera House, but I mean, it was locally used, and it was called an opera house. Yeah, and they when the tornado destroyed it, they divided up. It's still the Rebecca Lodge, the Masons, different things had things up there, but it got divided up after the tornado in 1905. This top part, if you see this top part up here, that's tin. And they're still above where Olson's were, where St. Patrick had a store. Above there is still the remnants of the original tin work. And it was amazing. And it was made right here in Marquette. We had a tin manufacturing company. So, but that was, most of it was ripped off in the tornado in 1905.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
And that's where one of the grocery stores was, to the back on this side, right?
No.
That's on the other
I'll show
bank.
you when we get to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you ready?
That's, Diane, that's strike 1 for you.
Look at all that.
No, back one time, this is where you can go to the senior citizen. At one time, the post office was there.
Dr. Damascus is there.
Guy hanging out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. This was, at one time, this was the Ingeborg Hotel. They had a hotel above there. I was going to say it's Janus, but it's not.
Tell him that Dr. Damascus didn't have that, did he?
He was across the street.
He was?
Was he across the street?
Are you sure?
Okay, this is another view, early 1900s, a view before the tornado. And you can see the entrance. You used to be able to go down underneath. There was a store. They had different stores under, but under here was an old barber shop.
Tell him there's
And
still a
we've got a
chair down
picture.
there.
What?
There's still a chair down there.
Yeah. So,
That's where Malin started Ruth's barbershop.
yes. Yeah. First customer was Janice.
That's another picture. That's a different picture. Go on.
Okay, here is the Marquette. This was built as it says above there, Marquette Bank. It's now the library building. Behind here, Diane,
Yeah.
is where the grocery store
Well,
was.
yeah, but there were 5, and I thought that was one of, I thought the one on the side of the senior center building was one of them.
That was one of them. Yeah, but this one was one also.
What happened to the dump? Why did they take the dump down?
We don't know. We don't know. I think it probably went
Did
away.
the dump back up?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, this will show you a better view. This is looking south on Main Street. You can see the Opera House block. You can see the bank building. You can also see the mill. That's where it's set. That's right now. It curved a little bit, and that's right where the bridge goes. But you can see, if you can see real close, that's where the road used to go straight across and then turned and went there. So that's where you can see the old mill. Okay, this is a better view of the bank. When this building was built, 2 stories, two stores. This here where the Legion is was called the Pure Blood store. And that was a dry goods clothing store. And it went an L-shaped, went behind the bank, and that's where the Thompson store came out. So it was an L-shaped building, and Pure Bloods were related to the Thompsons. So R.E. Thompson ran them. So, and then this is the Brooks house, Brooks store, built in 1888, and then in 1899 they built in between here where the old ranch house used to be, and that was built by Sam Norris for a hardware store. Another picture of the downtown. Okay, this is taken from the top of across the street looking west. This would be after the tornado. You can see the west side Main Street buildings. You can see the Thompson house or Dana Olson house now. You can see that's the Carlson house. This is where Fred Peterson lives. It was built by Ellen Bard. There's the Methodist Church after it was rebuilt. And there's the Nels Larson house that's still standing. So those were added on Cyclone Street, Bird's Eye View West toward Cyclone Street.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a bird's eye view of downtown looking north. You can see this is where Carrie Linder lives now. It used to be the Rex and Pauline Moore house, the schoolhouse. You can see that was before they built the one that I remember. Janice, you remember this one. Okay, this was the old power plant in Marquette. You can see that when they had our own electricity and power, and it became the city hall. Close to it would be the Carlson Carlson blacksmith shop. And then you can, if you see real close there, it's a lumber yard. We'll talk about that. So, and then you can see the KVR mill at the north end of town. That burned in 1936. Another view of looking at another view of the same thing, and another view. Okay, this is our Marquette Museum. This was built in 1910. By the Lutheran Church, the Lutheran League, the young people built that. It was to be a library up above, and down below it was a gymnasium. That's where Marquette played their basketball games from 1910 to 1917 when they built the school. So that's and if you can look at the beautiful tin ceiling if you go down, but it was built until 1917, and then it became the post office. It cost $4,000 to build, which in those days wasn't a lot of money. 4,000 in 1910. And there's when it was the post office. You can see the old city hall where it had the jail inside.
Telephone booth.
Oh, and for the young people, you probably don't remember, we had a telephone booth. Telephone booth. A real live telephone booth. Nobody knows what those are. Okay, this is one of the early pictures of Marquette. This was a doctor's office, a Dr. Ferguson, but anyway, it's set where the motorcycle museum sits now. This building was the old Arnold Haug. Do you remember the old pool hall? Okay, that is, of course, now torn down, but that's where the driveway is now, the parking lot. But that was originally a drugstore. P.F. Lynn, believe it or not, had a drugstore. It was called Svenska Apotek. Swedish, it says Svenska Apotek. And it was they had both Swedish and English.
Don't you hit me with that. Oh, there's a lot better picture.
There's a better picture. It looks like the Wild West, doesn't it?
Where was the livery station?
We'll get there.
Then it's out there. We'll show you here in a second. Okay. This is the back side of the library building.
That's the grocery.
This is where the grocery store was, where Ida Ceramics was. This would be if you go down to the library and turn and go west. You'd be standing across the street from Loudy's house, looking over to it. This is the west end of that building, on the north side.
The dry cleaning place before that. Remember, Walter?
Yes, where the dry cleaners. Yes.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a story that went up. Look at the bicycle. Can everybody see the bicycle?
In that little white long building we have behind, we cleaned it out, we found a bunch of old dry cleaning.
Oh, sure.
Equipment that was put back there, yeah.
Any idea how old that building is?
Which?
That little concrete building behind the library.
No, Janice might.
Janice. Ask Janice.
I don't know. I'd say Broad built in the 50s. I would say probably the 50s. Okay. Then on South Main, it was a lumber yard that we had down. You see the old horses. South Main.
South Main?
Yeah.
About where the car wash is, right?
Okay, this is a picture, and then they have it hanging in the bank. This is the location of the bank, right? There's Dixon Johnson's house in the background. This, in the top, at the very top, you'll see the city park. Okay, that is small building sits where the implement building sits now. This is where the bank and the telephone office sit. It was a manure spreader convention.
You should have been invited.
And I'll bet you they told stories. Whoa. Spread it thick. There's Dixon's house.
Alan, do you know that those doors on the garage are the original, those are, the overhead doors are the original overhead doors that were patented by the Johnsons from Marquette.
Yes, yes.
Remember John
On the show up there.
The windows? No, the garage doors.
The front garage doors.
Johnson Company.
Ernest Johnson's brother built, he invented the overhead door company. He started the overhead door company, and it's now all over the world.
So what we know today for our door company, and I got with the guys, and actually me and Dick Johnson actually got with like a guy, they did an article on him because they celebrated 100 years 2 years ago about his grandfather, or his is a generation there, but they invented the overhead door company, which is what we all know as our overhead doors. That is the original one. So it's kind of a really cool thing, and the guy was like super excited to experiment. It was cool.
Yeah. So we have famous people here. Okay. This building sits where Judy and Louise Johnson, their house sits now. That was the Burnison lumber yard. And it burned in 1902 on the eve of their wedding night. And there's a story that I don't tell publicly, but it was arson. So, yeah. Fred can tell you a little more about it. It wasn't his family. Unfortunately, it was a vengeance against their family. So, okay. You saw that old Swedish drugstore. This is this is the building before it was torn down. The pool hall that is now right beside the motorcycle museum, and that was originally an old drugstore.
With the parking lot.
Yeah, where the parking lot is. Okay. This is still standing. This is Grooms's barber shop. And this building was their home. That was originally built in 1884. Dr. Baird, who was the first doctor, built it in 1884 as a hotel. It was called the Marquette Hotel. And the Grooms family lived there for many, many, many years.
And they actually barbered out of the front corner of their house before they built that barbershop. And the Roney brother who lived here in town built that barbershop, the same one that built the Luther League home.
Cool. That's good to know. Thank you. Thank you, Diane. I'll erase your strike. Okay, and this, okay, I gotta tell about, this was on the northwest corner, and it was KKK, and we had a KKK here in Marquette, but as far as I've read all the minutes of the KK organization, and it was an organization like Odd Fellows or Masonic Lodge. They would get together and talk and go around the house and they'd have lunch and a good time was had by all. Basically, that's what they said.
Did I say something on that one?
Yeah, when we were doing the museum down here, we found the secretary minutes for the KKK. I took them home and read them. And the main concern every month was who was going to serve lunch next time. Yeah, and about anybody that's been in this town for several generations, your name's in there.
Yeah. But the good thing about this KK, I mean, when they were building this, each place were donating it, and they evidently had some inkling that this wasn't a good thing, because you can see they built it, and Signe Musselwhite's dad built these, but he did it, and he got it done before anybody realized what had happened. And it's not, you had to know to look at it to see it was a KKK. So, it's our history, unfortunately.
Now, there was an article written, and that's when this became an issue several years ago, and it turned into the Hutchinson News, that the Mason's name was like
Kevin Klein Kleinerschmidt. Kevin Klein Kleiners, yes.
Yeah.
I wrote that article. It's actually a maker's mark. It's not what people thought it was. It's initials. Exactly. They didn't know it until after. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to wait for Denver on that.
Well, that one got
Can I sing? right next, this is the south building, it's called the Ingman Block. There are 3 stores, and this is a modern version. This is when we put in the Marquette Medical Clinic soon after school had closed. But we put in the medical clinic, it's now the Next Tech, the company there. And you can see, this replaced the old, there used to be a bench in town, and it's on the mural outside here. You can see where they used to sit, like Les Mingemans and Holler, and some of them used to sit there for hours at a time. So, okay, this is the old Roman clothing store. Right now, it's the ranch house. And they have good food if you guys want anything. So, there was a Roman clothing store built in 1906. This was a souvenir when we had our celebration in 1984, showing Marquette what it looked like 100 years previous. Okay, this is the depot. This depot was built in 1906. The first depot was built in 1887. We have a picture of it, but it burned in 1905, and so they built a new one. And this is a picture probably, early 1900s, somewhere thereabouts.
Where did it sit?
Down at the north, straight at the north end of Main Street. If you drove all the way down north end of Main Street, you'd find the entrance. Janice used to hide out there a lot.
I did.
Okay, this is what the original one.
I have a story to tell you. I can remember that because we had an Aunt Hilma. She lived in Colorado, and when her husband died, they brought his body back, and they dropped it right up there.
And then what happened? Did you go get him? Okay, Janice probably helped you, right? This was the first building the Missouri Pacific built in 1887, and it burned unfortunately in 1905. Had a lot of bad things in 1905. The tornado,
November 2nd.
and then this burned. So, okay, another view of the depot.
That's
You can
one
see
we
the old elevator down west of there. So,
Is that the one that was there when we were kids?
yes. Another view probably in the 60s.
That had,
Another view in 68. Another view with the elevator in the background. Another view of the elevator. Okay, this was the KBR mill. The KBR mill set right now, if you go, isn't there a big building down there?
they're building the tire shop
Okay.
down in through there.
Yeah, but kind of
Fire
where,
station.
kind of where the fire station is now. Kind of where the fire station is now, and the elevator they tore down. But this originally started out as the KBR mill. It was called the Cumley Bard Rathbun Mill, KBR, and that it went by Indian Girl Flour. And this set at just south of the tracks on the north end of Marquette. It burned in 1936. It caught fire. Another view of it in 1907. This is a picture of it. Another picture of the mill. And it employed a lot of people in town here. Okay, now we're back downtown. This would be the Olson Furniture Store. That's Vic. Anybody remember Victor Olson? A few people, yes, yes. Victor. That was the old store when they had it. So even before LaRue. And that's Victor when he was young. There's Olaf Olson who started the furniture store. Olaf Olson. Another view of the furniture store. This is the front of the furniture store before they changed it. LaRue changed it in the early 50s.
Who's that standing there?
That's Olaf Olson.
Was he also an mortician?
He was. Up above, that's where until they built the funeral home, that's where they had the funerals. So they had the funerals up above there. So.
That's where the elevator was in there.
Yeah, there's still an elevator there. Okay, this is the interior of the drugstore. We think that's either Sharon Ingemanson or Tammy Crowdis. We're not sure who that is. If somebody knows, let us know. But that's the interior of the drugstore. Okay, Diane, this is the interior of the Thompson grocery store. Yes. And this is R.A. Thompson, and that's his daughter. She was a sister to Waldo Thompson, who was the dentist here. And Waldo had his office down where the little dog grooming is now, north of the post office. And he never used anesthesia. When he gave you he worked on your teeth, it hurt. Yes.
He was better than Doc Olson,
Oh, yes, yes. Gary.
There's been a question, there was used to be a dentist office about the library, and there's been some questions about who practiced up there. Was that Waldo?
No, I don't think so.
How about Doc Olson? Doc Olson?
I thought Doc Olson was
He was above right over here.
above the Distillery. But I don't know if she had the
You
telephone
know
office.
the dentist office.
Yeah, there's a whole
There's
X-ray
telephone
there's a
offices
whole
up there.
X-ray machine up there. If anyone wants
Okay, yeah. Okay, so the doctor was up there, but I don't know who it was. So, okay, this is the interior of the library building, about 1915. If you look really closely, you can see the painting of the buffalo that's above the fireplace, and they beautiful ceiling that's hopefully above there still, but they put the tile in, but that's about 1915 after they did the remodeling. Okay, this is the old Tribune office. This is the old Tribune office, and they used to have milk going on too. So you can see they had different, a lot of times the old timers would do 2 or 3 different businesses at the same time. Okay, this is the interior of the Brooks, the Ellerson and the Brooks store. It was a general merchandise store. You can see all the different, you can see the groceries here. You can see the dry goods over there. So it was just kind of a general merchandise store, looking towards the front of the store. This is another view. You can see some, and in later years you can see it's a little more cleaned up, and they have the groceries and they have the different things, the dry goods on the different sides. That's from the front looking back. There's the Carlson blacksmith shop. How many remember the Carlson blacksmith shop? Yeah, see? We used to fix a lot of machinery for everybody. Gosh. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Set about where the post office sits now.
You told me that was Emmett's dad. Emmett's dad.
Yeah. There's Emmett Carlson's dad, John Carlson.
Do you know who's next to him?
I don't know who that is. Another view of an interior store here. This would have been more of the clothing store that they had. The I.M. Jacksons had a women's clothing store, and you can see Mrs. Jackson and Mr. Jackson there, and so different. We had all kinds of things going on in Marquette.
Oh, that's underneath the
Okay,
bank.
this is the old barber shop underneath the old bank building across the street, and there's still a chair in there. There's still a chair. So this is the drugstore. We think this is Dr. Berquist, if anybody knows for sure. Not real sure. But this is the drugstore. You can see the stained glass So,
Alan,
Yeah.
I think that might be Adolph Hoffman, his wife.
oh, good,
I
okay.
think
So you think that's Adolph Hoffman as
They
well?
had the hops to say.
Okay, okay,
They had the exact same back bar.
okay. Then they could very be. He's standing like a hop, so I bet that's right. Okay. We think this is from the old either Bernisson's or Piper's meat market. They sold free groceries, but they had the meat market, and that would have been on the corner, part of the motorcycle museum now, the very corner building, built in 1912.
I still remember that when I was a kid.
They called it was Piper's then?
Piper's, they had it also, yes, Bernisson's and Piper's.
Okay.
Yeah. Came out. Somebody say Beverly.
Do
Okay.
you remember the people who had the last grocery store at that point? Kivitz.
Kivitz. Kivitz. They also have the nursing, old nursing home. Any other questions?
Alan,
Yeah.
are there still tunnels or were there ever tunnels under the town?
Yes, there are tunnels. Yes, there are tunnels. There is a, when that was built, they had a tunnel. You could go, it's more like doorways, rooms, but you could go from the old bank to the senior center to the drugstore. You need to stop. But then it goes on again. So you have different ones, and then under the old bank building or the library building, they're connected also there. So yes, they have tunnels and they can go from one store to the next.
Do they still have them?
They're still there, yes. Hard to get to, and we have to be careful, liability-wise, but you know, we can get you down and pick you up in the next week.
Okay, that's the other bank.
What were the tunnels used for?
The what?
What were the tunnels used for?
Well, basically, it was easier for some of the business people to go from one place to the next. Now, under the bank building, that was actually a store. That was a barber shop, and then a plumbing shop in later years. So they actually had a store there. But the rest of them were used more for travel between the buildings.
Is that ever under the art space?
No. They kept you separate.
Alan?
Yeah.
Two questions. Where was Ralph Moore's insurance agency? And where was the building where upstairs as a teenager we would have school dances?
Okay. Two different places we had. I'll answer the first one first. The dances we had also above the Legion, in that area there. Legion and Art Space we have there. And then also above the drugstore. There's a place up there. So we have dances both places. And then Ralph Moore's was where the medical clinic where the next step is now. Does that help you at all? We made it was the old, it was the, Duisburg had the liquor store next door. The next door there. Not the one that we remember, not John Duisburg, but Maxine, and she had that liquor store.
Some of the kid dances were above in the Oddfellows Hall.
Yes, that's what it is. Yes, yeah, above which would be above the, well, I call it the old ranch house, but above the art space and also above the Legion. So connected to it, double connected. Okay, that help? Okay.
Ask if anybody has any idea where any of those old chairs were up in the odd top.
I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to get one back in the
Okay,
museum.
this is the Marquette bank building before 1915 when it was remodeled.
1905.
Okay, now is that what it says?
Yeah, I
Okay,
have it for like.
good, 1905. Okay, this is on the river, the bridge, which, is this the west one, out west?
I think so.
Okay. This is taken off the old bridge that used to cross west of Marquette. That bridge was originally, well, I'll give you the history of the bridges. First there was a fjord just down by the creek, kind of where the dry creek comes out. And then in 1878, they built it, and we'll show you in a little bit. It's a curved bridge that was across the river bridge. Okay, that was wiped out in the 1903 flood. So then they put this straight across one that was put down there, and in 1956 or 57, part of it collapsed. Janice, this is a true story. Janice was going across the bridge and it collapsed. It is true.
Let me tell him something about that.
When that bridge went down, the truck was going over or something, so we lived right down on the other side. So Mom used to go across that bridge when they were building it, and the guys that were building it would carry KK and I across. And I can still remember sitting there looking down at that water, thinking we were on the Eiffel Tower or something. It scared me to death.
See, you did cause it to collapse. Okay. Anyway, there's the bridge that used to be west of Marquette. You can see where it was. It was crossing the Smoky Hill now. You can see the original dam. You can see and here is, right here is the old, there's kind of coming out right over here. It's where the dry creek came out, and that's where they used to ford across. That was the first one. They put the second one in 1878. This one was put in 1904. And by the way, Fred Peterson has some wonderful pictures to look over here. So if you, before you leave, if you want to stop and look at his pictures, it'd be great. Okay. Another view. That was the original dam, the original bridge that was washed out in 1903. You can see the water rushing over that. It never was like that, except in flood time.
I wish we'd see some more of it again.
And again.
I'm going to make it bigger. Give me a minute.
Okay, and there's the bridge. And that was taken out a few years ago. We tried to save it and put it in the Eisenhower Park, but the county didn't think so. They had sold it for scrap. Would have been nice to have saved it for the history. Various views of the bridge. There you can see, keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going. Keep going. Various views of the river. There, and that's the flood stage in 1903. Then it's already moved off. So.
Where's that river?
Alan, was the dam used for the bill?
Yes, that's why they built the dam, so they could run by water power. So, and it really provided, one story about the mill. The mill was when it was built in 1873, it was the farthest west mill in Kansas. People as far as Great Bend would come here and camp out for a week to get their wheat ground into a mill because there was no other mill close by. It was fine to have a mill, Lindsfors had a mill, but we were the farthest west. And so they would come as far as Great Bend just to get their mill done. And that mill, and we'll show a picture in a little bit, that mill was going until the night in 1906. and then it burned down.
And one of the millstones is in front of Riverview.
Yes, in front of Riverview Estates. It's the millwork that ground the wheat. There you can see a picture of the mill, that where it's set. Another picture of the mill.
Go.
Yeah. And another picture.
Bridge. In the bridge.
Okay, you can see this is the dam. There's the bridge. That's before they even had the bridge across. You can see up here is the mill, and the sawmill is attached to it. So the flour mill and the sawmill were run by Bacon's. The sawmill and the flour mill were run by H.S. Bacon. Another picture. Janice likes a lot of these pictures.
Some of them were different.
Okay, if you enlarge this. This is a good view of the bridge looking east. And this foundation of the mill and the dam is still down there if you go down to the water. This is the 1878 bridge, and you can see the mill there. So that picture is about from 1895. Okay, that's just my house. That was Hans Hansen, who in his backyard that's where the town charter was signed. He built this house in 1888 for $2,400. And there's another picture. That's about 1905. If anybody remembers Otto Hansen, that's Otto right there. Otto
Which one's
Hansen.
Emil?
Huh?
Which one's Emil?
Emil's right there.
Oh, Emil's up with
It looks nice there. Yeah. If anybody remembers Emil Hansen, he was called Goat Hansen. He raised goats. That was him looking dapper. He didn't look dapper in later years. Story. He would not associate with the rest of the family. He lived in the back part of the house, and the only time he would associate was when Mrs. Hanson was having Ladies' Aid or a women's group. Then he'd walk through the front part, and he stunk.
When we farmed the Hanson land for years, and I used to go up there with my dad, and Otto and Emil, Otto was really nice, and Emil, he would just look like a really dirty old man. He always had his brown safari hat and the khakis, and every day when we'd be out at school playing baseball, he'd walk downtown with the goats following him to get his mail. So we always called him the goat man. I always thought he was just a filthy old guy. I didn't want to have anything to do with him. When we cleaned up and made the museum down here, Alan had brought a bunch of stuff from the Hansons out of Lincoln, and there was a box that said Emil Hansen. So I got a hold of that box and took it home and read it just because I wondered what in the world he'd done his whole life. Discovered he was a professor of engineering at Iowa State University. There was a letter in there from the credit union of Iowa State. It said, "Dear Mr. Hansen, will you please come get your money out of our credit union? We now have more shares than we do."
Yeah. That's when it was painted red.
Janice was his favorite. Okay, that's just another picture.
You know.
Oh, and the stone wall that's in front of our house, that is Marquette's first schoolhouse. It was the first schoolhouse in Marquette. It was built of stone, and it's set right where the school is now. If you walk in the front door of the schoolhouse, it was built in 1875. They used it for the foundation when they built the 1887 school. And in 1917, when they tore down the second school and built the third school, Otto bought the foundation and built a cattle shed down by the creek. So we were able to save it and move it and assemble it. So we're saving Marquette's history in front of the house.
Where is that at?
The front stone wall in front of our house. That's Marquette's schoolhouse, first schoolhouse.
That's something.
Okay, this is the Munson House on Swedonia Street,
It's that little, across from
across from Kenny Talbot's place.
and that's my grandfather and grandmother and my dad.
And that's Philip Larson,
That's John.
John Larson.
And Emily.
Your grandparents.
Yeah, grandparents, and that's my dad, Philip.
Okay. When he was little, good heavens.
That's the Hammer House. My
Okay, this is where Blackie Nelson lived, out west of town. This is where John Larson lived, right?
Yeah, he built that house. Oh. Could I get rid of this computer?
You're doing fine, Janice.
Yeah. So, yeah, they built that house. There we go.
Okay. This is the one of the first houses built in Marquette. This was down by the creek. This was Anders Ericsson built this in 1869. He lived in the dugout while they built this, and then in 1874, 5 years later, he built the stone house. But this was down kind of where the creek comes in. It's where the water plant is from Marquette. If you go down past Berg's house, where Marshall Berg and Von Berg lived, it's down there. Okay, this building was the first house built in Marquette. This set where Riverview Estates sits now. This was H.S. Bacon's, after they lived in the dugout across the river, they built this, and that's where they lived for quite a few years. And I keep thinking this is Janice's house, but it's not. So this is a house in Marquette. If anybody can tell us what it is, I'll give you $1. This is a house, the Yoakum Cox House, south of Marquette, about 7 or 8 miles. And you can see that their old original house was old stone, and then they built frame. You know, they took what they had. They started out with dugouts, and then if they had access to stone, they built stone like the Fremont Church, things like that. And then, of course, when they were able to, they built frame houses. This would be R.A. Thompson's house, which would be Dana and Julie Olson's house now. Side of the house, another side of the house.
Okay.
Okay, this house was torn down a few years ago. That was the H.E. Bruce house, and it sits, do you ever know where Doc Dressler used to live? Okay, it was right north of there. The Grace family, Bob Grace lived there at one time. And Kenny and Flo Jones lived there the last. But that was their house. And you can see the flood where it was flooding that part of the town. That's a beautiful view of the house.
Tell about how it was brick and then they changed
The what?
it. How it was brick.
Yeah, it's a brick house, but then they covered it with some kind of sheathing, so we don't know why. It was kind of weird. Okay, Jackie, this is your grandmother's house. Your grandmother Jost? That was her house on Main Street. It sits where right now where Russell and Flora Malm live on Main Street, and they'd sit there, and at one time it was a hotel. They used it as a hotel here in Marquette. That is the Olaf Olson house on down on Walton Street. They've got trees in front of it, but that is the house where Olaf Olson built. Brian Larson lived there, and I think now Brady's lived there.
And where's the answer? And, yeah.
Okay. That's Dr. Olson's house in Lindsfors.
What?
It's an old stone house in Lindsfors. It's Dr. Olson's house in Lindsfors.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Without the Hedberg, across from Mount Hedberg.
There's Dr. Olson's house in Lindsfors. That was right south of Coronado Heights. It was right south of Coronado Heights. The Elam Lutheran Parsonage, that was the one that built in 1914 when they moved the other house over north of it. Okay, there's the cabin in our backyard, and that's where Marquette started, February 9th, 1874, and they lived in that. The log cabin was attached right to the north, and they kept their cattle in the log cabin, and they lived in this. They had 9 children, and they lived there for 17 years. Yeah. And only one of them had kids. I wonder why.
Emo would have been one of the kids. Emo would have been one of the kids.
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
We don't know what this is.
It's a sod
It's
house.
an old sod house that Janice just stuck in here.
There's the houses again.
That's when I start going. Okay, this was built by Fred Peterson's grandparents, right, Fred? For his mother, and it still sits right south of his house in the yard. It's their playhouse. Really, isn't it a cool thing?
That's Geneva, the one that would have made.
Yes, that's Geneva right there.
Tell them that that's one was the 100-year.
Yes, she
Yeah.
survived the tornado. Okay, this log cabin was built where the parish hall of the Lutheran Church sits now. This was built in 1909. They were having a Swedish celebration, and they were trying to celebrate replica of an old log cabin. And all these are Marquette residents. And I think this is the lady. You guys remember Speck Nelson, Speck Spot, Newt Nelson? That was their mother. This is Bjorklund. And there's a case where you have these names, you know. How would you like to have your brothers? Speck, Spot, and Newt. Speck Nelson, Spot Nelson, and Newt Nelson. And I asked for Newt. Well, he was a little older than Spike and Spot. This is the Swedish celebration in 1909, and they were having it in the right there where the parish hall sits. And that's okay. And we think this is an old postcard of Marquette, and we think this was Uarda Thompson back when she was young. This is a hunting. They were going hunting in a Model T. Very fancy.
That's one that was out by John Hughes.
Yes, we think this one.
That's my dad up there.
We think that is. Does that say Fairview? Anyway, John Larson. That's
No,
Janice's
that's Philip
dad.
right there.
Is right there at the
Philip.
top.
And Archie Johnson's on here somewhere.
Archie Johnson is okay. Okay.
But I'm not sure which one's him. Ooh. Oh, that's a truck.
Okay. Bring this in, or larger. This is a picture of Marquette High School in 1913. You can see it was the track team in 1913, boys and girls. So, a picture of the park. This is a picture of somebody driving an old Model T. Janice is right in the back.
That's my dad right there.
You could have been in the back. Okay. This is a picture of Anders Ericsson, the first person to settle here in Marquette. And the poor guy, he had the biggest nose. I mean, just, oh, really, really, really sad. Anyway, and
We don't know who that is.
okay, this is the Marquette Band. We used to have a band, and it's taken in front of the depot. But the Marquette Band, it was started by John M. Broman back in like 1876. And they did it for many, 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 many years. So, see Cheryl, you're in on them. This is another picture taken in front of the Lutheran Church. Another picture of the band. They played for in the city park many, many times. They had a park, Riverside Park, down south of Riverview, down by the river. And then in about 1910, they moved the band shell up into the park, and then they used that for a few years, and then built the stone one that we have now.
I think that one's Burtis. Ask Cynthia if she thinks that's Burtis.
Yeah. Cynthia, that almost looks like your grandfather, your father, your grandfather. It looks like a ring screw. I never know. Okay, this was a band getting ready for one of the celebrations back in the probably 24, somewhere thereabouts. This is Mr. and Mrs. Hanson. You can see she is a daughter of Anders Ericsson. Just a picture of one of the early forms of transportation here in Marquette. Okay, this is U.S. Mail. Roney Brothers, they did the first, it was the first rural mail carrier in the county that was done here in Marquette, around the county. And it was Wesley Roney that did that. This is a picture of the people that worked at the mill, the North End Mill, before it burned in 1936. This was on Main Street in Marquette in the late 1890s, early 1900s. They had a bicycle club. And this is my grandfather, Reuben Lindfors, right there. So, but they used to do bicycles. And it was both for recreation, but transportation also. Why walk when you can ride? This would be a special one for Diane Talbot. Bicycle. Okay, this was an old sign that we used to have coming into Marquette. Hi neighbor, we want to welcome everybody to Marquette. There's our sign, Marquette. Our mural. There's our mural on the side. Yeah, we painted it 3 times, and it was based on this postcard of Marquette of the different views of the town. So we thought it was a neat way to portray the town. And there was the old mural that we had on the South End Motorcycle Museum. They're going to put a new motorcycle museum is going to put up a new mural of motorcycles, which is appropriate since it's a motorcycle museum.
Chamber of Commerce is putting it
Chamber of Commerce is doing that. These are some old postcards. I think you'll get a kick out of some old postcards you'll see in Marquette.
I got these from Verna Phillips.
Oh, from Verna Algers Phillips.
Yeah.
There's folks in Marquette, think a heap of you. And this is a picture of Marquette looking south. There's Ida Sharkey's house. There's the Lutheran Church. You can see the Methodist Church way in the background. You can see the downtown in the foreground. There's another postcard, souvenir of Marquette, Kansas. Souvenir of Marquette, greetings from Marquette. Oh, this is a cute one. I've got a little behind Marquette. That's Janice's favorite. These are just some funny ones. And this, when they used to advertise, we were the nearest town to Canopus Lake. Marquette, okay?
We already looked at that, didn't we?
Yeah, there's the view of the town, another one, Marquette.
When you're out for a drive, the only...
Come to Marquette. Okay, different advertising of Marquette. These are some farm scenes. Well, no.
Langley,
And
Kansas.
there's actually Langley, Kansas. Langley, Kansas. Here's some different farm scenes that we collected around the farms that were here. The old threshing, old getting hay. So a lot of different farm scenes.
What's that one? We haven't gone through the tornado pictures
No.
yet.
It's a bird's eye view.
We might be here till tomorrow. Here we go.
Okay, these are starting the tornado. Tornado that killed actually 28 people that night, 33 within the period of time because of injuries. So these are some of the pictures of the tornado. You got to remember, this is the days before electricity. It just was horrendous. It basically wiped out everything. Tornado scene, another tornado
That's the same
scene.
one. Isn't that the church?
Yeah, same one. This is the one that was taken, if you can enlarge that. This was taken from the top of the Thompson house, which would be Dana Olson's house. They're looking west and north. This is where Pam and Danny Morrell's house sits right there. Basically, there's nothing gone. I mean, it's gone. You can see the Methodist Church steeple in the background. The house in the very background, we have a picture of it. It looks like, oh, it was saved. No, it was totally knocked off the foundation. It's right west of where Frank and Leonard Rock lived, where Carl Martin lived. So, another view. It's just, I mean, it's, you think, oh, they look the same, but it's, these people are just, you know, digging people out of the debris.
Emily Nelson.
So,
Emily Nielsen, that was my grandmother. I don't know.
see, in their house.
That came from somewhere. Huh.
Another picture, another view. I mean, it just was destruction. Luckily, the fort, I mean, oh, I want to tell you one thing. And I'm not talking about the Indians that were here. And I know I'm digressing, but anyway, the Indians were of course already here. But when the settlers were settling down, you know, and it really was their land. But anyway, we took it. But in about 1869, there was a fear. They had heard where they had Indian scares and Indian attacks. They built a fort, an earthen fort, about 8 foot high and about 25 by 25. And it was a fort that they could hide in. They had holes to see out to shoot. And it was about a fourth of a mile west of where Mike and Cynthia Holtz live now, out in the field. They did it that way so they weren't close to any trees, so the Indians couldn't shoot their arrows from them. But in 1869, they said it was a scare coming, and all the settlers stayed in that fort for about 6 weeks until they knew it was safe. But it was scary. There was a lot of stories in the Marquette history book about the Indians coming to their houses, their dugouts, their log cabins, and wanting basically food. I mean, we had taken away a lot of their livelihood here, buffalo and the growing crops and everything, and so they were having a hard time too. So they were not dangerous. The Indians were not dangerous around here. They just kind of were a nuisance, and we're scared of them. So this is a picture of the Opera House block. This is where you go in on the south side of the Opera House block, where you go into the Senior Citizen Center. But you can see the damage that it did. More pictures of the tornado. They're just more pictures. And like Janice said, if you wanted this, they have a CD of these pictures at the bank.
They're all on there.
They're on there. So if you wonder what picture number 37 was, and if you really want to go back and see which stairway that Janice was on, you can go back and see.
Tell them that, let me tell you something. On that CD,
There's also, it's a plot of the Lutheran cemetery that has everybody's gravestone and where you can find them. There's also some letters that were sent back from the Klondike. There used to be a man, one of the characters Alan was talking about. He went to the Klondike, and he sent letters back to the Tribune the whole time he was gone. And so I have all of those on that disc, and I think that's maybe about it.
Yeah, when we did the celebration in 2005 to honor the people of the tornado, we put white crosses on all of the graves, both at the Marquette Cemetery and the Lutheran Cemetery. So,
and they had that program that.
yeah, that sits about where Art Mayfield, his sister, lives now, the corner of Jackson and 2nd Street. So anyway, there's a lot of pictures and more information on Marquette. And
there's one of the churches.
it's way past time. It's way past time. Any questions or final questions or anything? Oh, and Lois has a picture that Christy Myers painted of the first depot. So if you might want to look at that also, it's kind of a cool picture. It was built in 1887. Anyway, I don't have any more. I've run out of time. I've run out of drink. So that's it. Thank you.